Okay, so we left off talking about specific advice. To kind of summarize some of the things I was talking about before, Friedrich Benti was a professor at St. Louis at the turn of the century, not this century, but the other century. And he said this: "You'll never cure your brother of his errors by sneering at him. Even if you think young folks are wrong, sneering at them is not going to help." If you could excise from your interactions with the young guys one thing, it would be the just pick yourself up by your bootstraps talk. I know that's like a meme now, and I'm not saying not tell them to be tougher. A lot of young guys are soft in many ways, but if that's all you say, it's not going to be taken well. And frankly, yeah, our older generation's tougher on average in many ways. Yeah. Oh, I've heard you say it, right? You know, I have. And that's fine. That's great. But but that doesn't mean they have it easier in all respects. Again, let's be moderate with how we critique. So, just as a biblical example, who had it harder, Jonathan or David? What?
In what way?
When David was running away from Saul, and he's living out in the wilderness, being chased all over Israel and beyond, who had it harder? Him or Jonathan, who was back sleeping in the palace?
Yeah, Jonathan had to put up with his dad.
Yeah. You guys are anticipating where I'm going with this. Physically, day-to-day creature comforts, David had it harder. No, hands down, sure. But in terms of if I had to choose, living out in the wilderness, running, and that's going to be tough. And yet at the same time, who's he with? His most loyal followers, people he can trust. Or do you get to sleep in a palace and have all the niceties of creature comforts, but you're with your dad who is crazy and hates God, Again, I'm not trying to make these parallels all one for one, but I'm saying, you got to think about, okay, so maybe older generations are tougher on some things. Maybe younger generations are softer on some things. Maybe it's flip-flop for other stuff. But if you only say, come on, just work harder, there's got to be a recognition first. And so again, I'm not saying don't beat them up, guys need to get ragged on. They do. But it has to be moderate and in recognition of real struggles. And I think that the times are different. That makes people more receptive. Or as Proverbs says about the guys, and this is speaking to the younger guys, even if your elders don't critique you as they ought or that you like, the Bible is very clear. My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. So yeah, I don't always critique my children the way I should, but they are duty bound. Duty flows both ways. So I've been kind of ragging on the older generations, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. But the younger generations do need to take criticism as well and hear the words of Solomon here. Also, contrary to common complaints made against young men, not all of them are soft losers, And you know this already. I'm sure you know some fine young sons of Missouri. But that generational idea that all the young guys typically are soft, seriously, many of these guys are going to be hard in a good way. Because bad times, which we're in, forge hard men. And they are going to grow up. Don't you want them to grow up to lead the church and the nation? That's what we want. And again, nobody is going to get better and reach their potential in godliness, in national life or family life. If you, I know none of you only sneer. Okay, I get that. I'm not saying that, but what's the ratio? You know what I mean? Sneering doesn't help. You might not even minus any of your criticisms, but with a different tone. But I don't want to be the tone police too much, so let's keep going. Some more positive things. Older generations really need to remember your potential for influence. Do not underestimate it. I cannot tell you how many young people that I've talked to who will swear up and down saying, I don't even care what my parents think anymore. They failed me, they did this, they did that. And yet, guess what? If the parent actually shows interest, not always, but many times, that's what they long for. Again, it's according to nature, you know? I mean, you can see this with extreme examples in terms of distance, in terms of time shared. If someone is adopted, right? Never knew their birth mother, never knew their father, you know? Many of them still what? Maybe some of you here in the room are adopted, but I mean, yeah, they want to know. It's built into our nature to want to know where we came from. And so don't underestimate your potential influence. Even if you're 95, you know, you still have things to give and you still have things to say. And it probably is going to mean a lot more. So don't waste time. Get on it. Elders, I would encourage you to think of yourselves as coaches and not scolds. You know, so I'm going to rag on the boomers for a second. Sorry. It's painful for me to watch some, in my childhood, I'm not speaking about my own parents here, but friends' dads, they were like the best coaches, like in sports, like just awesome coaches. They took time, they cared about individual players, they were just awesome. And yet all that wisdom and patience and time that they spent, which isn't wrong, they didn't spend in the home, like it was just heartbreaking. It really was heartbreaking. Now again, I don't know where you fall on this. I don't know if this is something you look back and regret, but I mean, it just really is sad. And so you all probably can remember a coach or a father figure who really meant a lot to you. And I think sometimes parents are uncomfortable, or grandparents are uncomfortable with being super direct. But hey, if somebody gave you a little secret hat and now you're the coach, now you feel like you can you can say stuff. Well, God gave you the office of being a parent and being a grandparent. There's no higher honor. I mean, you have so much potential for influence, and even if you're a year away from death. It truly is amazing. You hear those stories about people who reconcile right before a parent dies. I mean, it doesn't always happen, but it really is moving. So I would not underestimate your influence. I'd also check out an interview by Professor Peter Scare, by Jason Broughton, the Gottesdienst crowd, Moral Fitness, the Third Use of the Law as Coach. And he really talks about viewing the law in the sense of the third use as a coach, but really also in this paternal way. So again, that's more broad ranging about other topics, but on this point, I think it's actually pretty good. Okay, some very, very specific nitty-gritty stuff. Give them their inheritance. And I don't just mean money. And several people wanted to talk about this, so I'm bringing it up now. First and foremost, the greatest inheritance that you can pass on is the faith. So I've been talking to people during breaks and whatnot. My child has fallen away, or they don't come to church as much. I mean, now's the time to try to make gains on that. And talk to your pastor about it, talk to other friends, get on it so that you can pass on the greatest thing that you can pass on, and that is the faith. I mean, I can't give you specifics in your specific situation, but this is what you should be thinking about of, what am I giving my children? How much do you think about passing on the faith compared to all the financial stuff? Maybe you care more and think more about the faith than financial stuff. But most families, it's all about what? Money. Possessions, money, yeah. So I really think you should focus on that. And also, what can you do, not just in your own family, but also in the congregation or in your local community? One thing, as we talked about, young men don't have a lot of time just to be with the guys, typically in this day and age, is to carve out time and opportunity for men to get together. You know, maybe you don't take the granddaughters hunting anymore. Or maybe just one time, it's just the guys, you know? Think about opportunities. And you mothers and grandmothers, maybe you have enough girl time already, but if you don't, have the girls and don't let the boys come. You know, teach them skills that you have that they don't. Because they don't have home ec in school. They don't. I mean, we're going to get to the girls in a little bit. I've got kind of a subsection on that. But I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, shop classes, not a lot of them anymore. Home ec, I mean, a lot of things that you guys are trained in, you just can't take for granted anymore. And to pass something on means you actually have to be active about it. So also, I would encourage these young guys to become leaders in the congregation. Don't promote them before they're ready. I'm not saying like make a 25-year-old an elder. You know, I mean, that might not be a good idea. But at the same time, there's lots of complaints in many congregations. I'm sure this will resonate with you. We don't have enough people to fill these spots, right? You guys ever face that? Yeah. Well, start raising them up. I mean, that was the whole point of male acolytes, so that they could literally be acolytes to the pastor, follow him around. Now, not every boy is going to become a pastor, and that's perfectly all right. But after they're an acolyte, get them into ushering. Get them so that they're used to part of their, life is serving the church in some capacity. So even if those steps have been missed for some people, get them in on low levels of time and commitment and stress, and work them in. Work them into the leadership. And you got to be proactive about it. And not just, hey, you want to do this? We need somebody to fill the slot. I mean, actually say, no, this is important. Spend some time. Take them out for coffee or beer or whatever. And also give them advice. But again, not like a scold, but like a coach. Like a coach. You pull a kid aside who just had a horrible game of pitching, You're not just going to scold him. Now, once in a while, you might just give it to him. Sure, fine. But the majority of the time, hey, let's analyze this. Let's talk it through. Let's figure out where you went wrong. And so I would encourage you older guys to think, how would a good coach do this? Because even a coach is a paternal role. And I think that kind of brings out in a guy the right posture to the player or to the son that you want on your team. You want them on your team, don't you? You want them to thrive. So I really think the coach example is helpful. Okay, and speaking of advice, sure, times are different, but that doesn't mean that you don't say, hey, this is how it worked in my day. It might not all be applicable, but telling stories. I mean, that's what we've been doing over the last 2 days. David and Joab and all those people lived a long, long time ago. And circumstances are different, but some of these truths are eternal. I mean, tell them those stories. I think that's very, very helpful. And especially encourage them on how to get wives. So, like I said, I think I've ragged on the older generations quite a bit. But young people, again, maybe not personally, every single one of you, but I've been kind of shocked at so many young guys not putting in the time and the effort to find wives. Now, again, I totally acknowledge and understand that the marriage market is a mess and it's hard. So I totally acknowledge that, but it's almost like the drive. Now, maybe that's some cope, you know what I mean? It's useless, so I'm going to be satisfied being single and I'm going to try and do that. But encourage them, even if the marriage market is horrible, even if, it's hard to find a good Christian woman. I really would push them, not in a naggy, scoldy way, but as a coach. Say something like this. I know it might not be this easy now, like how it worked for me, or things are different, but this worked out for me. This is what I did. Give them your testimony. Also, stuff is important too. Hand over your libraries, especially pastors, tools and other resources. And not just resources, skills. So I don't want to puff you up too much, but it's true. Boomers are eminently competent at a lot of things that people aren't competent about now. I mean, you can see this in the trades where they're desperate for people, desperate. But also, I mean, just like general life competency. Now, some of that's because you guys got trained better than us younger guys did. And some of it is because maybe you worked harder. I don't know. But the point is that you do have a lot of competency. And you want to pass that on. But competency has to be taught, and it can't just be assumed that they should just know stuff. Like, it's got to be taught. And again, not like a scold and not like shaming, but like, hey, let's do this. Here's how to change your car's oil. You know, I mean, simple stuff. I'm sure I couldn't find the graph because the data doesn't exist. But how many people can do basic house maintenance or auto repair? I mean, you know how that chart goes, right? Write down. I mean, these simple things are not just insignificant in and of themselves, but also more importantly, if you've shown the time and the effort to teach them competency, guess what that leads to? What? Confidence. Also another thing, which I'm thinking of, obviously we're not on the same track, but that's okay. What? Curiosity, yeah. And sparking conversations about these other things. The faith, getting a wife, all of these other things. I mean, that is a window into all of this stuff. It is that TIME. That's how the younger generations of every generation spell love. I mean, it just works. Just take the time. And you guys do. The older generations just are competent on so many things. You know. Okay. Pass on your resources and property. Yeah, stuff is important. And I would say help financially now. So that was to your question. Again, it's going to depend on the child. And I think here we have to, and we kind of talked about this already, about a child that's fallen away or will waste money. You gotta consider that. And also, what do you give to a child who will use those resources? But if we have that mindset of passing on family generational treasures, whether it be possessions, goods, any of this stuff, like you should think of yourself as a steward, not just, hey, this is my money, I work for it, I'm going to spend it however I want. But no, you're a steward, and you want to usher that into the next generations, whether it be sons or grandsons, and pass that along. Yes, be wise. I mean, we do have a duty to our children who have fallen away. I'm not saying if they're a pagan, give them nothing. But at the same time, yeah, I saw someone, I see what you said, Richard. You're like, yeah. No, I would push back against that. I sympathize with the sentiment because you don't want to give resources to someone who's going to be maybe using those against the faith. Absolutely. Yet at the same time, we do have a familial duty. If God forbid, if one of my children apostatized, I would still care about them, not just hope for their salvation and care about their soul, but also their physical well-being. And that's a duty on my plate as their particular father. So I still would care about their well-being, and I would pass on something. But it wouldn't be the same as with someone, another son or daughter who I know is living a godly life, is going to use those resources for their, thriving and also the church's thriving. But yeah, so there's careful considerations. I don't think you should just blanket say, I'm going to carve it up equally. You do have to think, you got to balance those things. And you don't want them wasted. But at the same time, do it now, I would say. The sooner the better. And not just because of tax evasion. You know what I mean? Which I'm fine evading taxes. That's great. The less money stolen by the government is better. What's that?
I think you meant tax avoidance.
Whatever. Sure, let's go with that. Yeah, I know I'm joking around, right? But my point is I would do it now, and not just because of tax law, but also because when does a family need the most help?
When they're young.
When they're young, when they're starting off. Yes, you do want them to achieve some of those goals so to speak, on their own to a certain extent. You want the young little bird to fly, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't help in very critical ways. Like, hey, we'll buy you a house, because the market is obscene, right? You know what I mean? Right now, it's ridiculous. If one of your grandkids is going to college, maybe you lift that horrible crushing burden of debt off of. Don't let it get on their shoulders. You know what I mean? It's not the rates that were decades ago, where you could pay. Okay, let me rag on the older generations one more time. It used to be, it's less now, but it used to be very common. I would hear this. Oh, I don't see what all these young people are complaining about. I paid off my college through my summer job. Yeah, and that's why people would say, okay, boomer, because I don't care how hardworking you are, I don't care how high skilled you are, you cannot do that now. It's like not even possible.
Except for the classical college.
Yeah, there you go. Christian paid me good money for that alley-oop. Yeah, no, fair enough. But most colleges, it's crushing debt. Help them out. Help them out, because those resources aren't just yours. They aren't. First of all, who does everything belong to? God. And secondly, that's my point. It's not just that everything is truly God's, and then on the earthly side, it's just mine because I worked for it. But no, wealth is given to a man to pass on to the next generation. I mean, that's how we should think about it. Think about old, like aristocratic or noble families over in old Europe. Or you can think about it here in America too. Like they would have these estates. Yeah, maybe the lord of the manor was the lord for those 40 years. But what was he preserving it for? His son, and then down, and he thinking 3, 4, 5 generations ahead. That's how we should be thinking about how are we going to put our wealth to use so that our whole generation, all these generations are going to thrive. He wouldn't have dreamed of selling it, He'd go into huge debt before he sold it. I mean, that's the way we should be thinking too, whether we're lords or the lowliest peasant. We need to be thinking about ourselves as stewards of these good gifts. Well, the sermon last night was excellent. The sermon this morning was good too, no offense. But last night tied in so well, and I just want to echo what Pastor Viggers was saying. Yes, give them truth and goodness shaped by memories of better days, but not just, it's not like it used to be. There's 2 different ways you can tell stories. Just a personal anecdote, I remember many, many times in my youth, always hearing adults saying, oh, only 25 people came to the youth group event? Back when I was a kid, it was 50, 60, 100 people used to come to this conference. Confirmation classes. Okay, you can tell that story, but if you're just making comments, it makes those kids feel like it's not enough that us lowly 3 showed up. If you're always pining for the old days, you're just going to stir up bitterness. But that's not to say you shouldn't talk about the old days. You should. I mean, you guys have a gift, which is you have a memory of better days. That's actually very inspiring. Because it also, the bitterness of younger generations, it's because this is all they know, right? Okay? You can, but don't make it kind of it's not like the old days, and I guess we just got to be content to remember stuff, and they say, well, I can't remember anything, so. But you've got a gift there too. The LCMS works, yes, because we are a family of faith, but it's also because we actually, in real time, in real life, marry each other. We are actually, it works because it's a clan. It's an extended clan of people who don't just share a faith, but also, over time, they literally join together throughout their generations by marriage, which produces children, so thus they are united both in faith and eventually by blood as well. I mean, it really is, obviously, the faith is higher than natural goods and natural affections, but they're not in opposition to each other at all. At least we hope not. Okay, I want to now turn to do a little brief section on the daughters of Missouri, because I've been primarily talking about sons. And daughters of Sarah or daughters of Atalia, that's a pretty extreme example. A wise woman builds her house, but the foolish pulls it down with her hands, Proverbs 14. So Atalia, if you know this story, you know where I'm going. If you don't, she was a descendant or a daughter of King Ahab from the north, and she married a prince in the southern kingdom of Judah. And when her son died, I'll just read, when Atalia, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose. She usurped the rulership and destroyed all the royal heirs. I mean, she's an absolute tyrant against all three estates. She literally murders her own progeny because she sees them as threats to her rule. I mean, this should remind us of many women today, and again, I know many men will encourage them to do this, but of course, and we've already brought it up, abortion, you're murdering your own children. This is being a daughter of Atalia. I mean, she murders her heirs. Why? For her own personal gain, her own personal desires. She also usurps the government, totally an illegitimate, tyrannical government. And of course, the third estate, she sets up false worship, and she tries to suppress the truth of God. Sarah, on the other hand, is commended by the Lord in Holy Scripture. Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. I quoted the King James because that's what it is in the 43 Catechism. So that really points towards two different goals. They're extreme examples. Well, at least Atalia is an extreme example. Sarah is the ideal. But I wanted to point those out because what goal are our daughters oriented towards? And what goal should we orient them towards? Obviously, there's no higher calling than to be a wife and a mother. And I know that most people will at least say that. But there's words and then there are your actions which betray what goal you're actually oriented towards. Now, I know that there's the whole trad wife movement and all this kind of stuff. One thing that I would critique about it is sometimes it is presented as, hey, this is not only the right thing, but it's fun and it's maybe even easy. It's not easy. It is not easy being a good mother. It's not easy being a good wife. It is difficult. And if you follow God's path as a woman, it may be very weary in this world, but you will have God's blessing and approval. If you follow the world, though, you may find fleeting pleasure, but it will turn to ash in your mouth. And we do need to say that to our daughters. We should not pretend like it's just easy. It's hard, but it's good. It's very, very good. And they will find true satisfaction in it. Yeah, the daughters of Missouri are called by Satan to live a life of discontent and bitterness. And that is a big problem today. And this is a distinction to the bitterness of the young men. We see this all the time in the scriptures about being embittered, whether it be husbands against wives or provoking your children to becoming embittered. But also, it is a battle of bitterness for women, and there is a particular type of battle against bitterness. And we see this all the way back with Eve, don't we? Your husband shall rule over you, but your desire, your grasping, usurping desire, shall be for him. I mean, we are told literally in Scripture that this is going to be a struggle. Men have their own, natural, inborn, sinful struggles and tendencies. And women have theirs, and that is one of them. And it does lead to discontentment. Or when we talk about with Sarah, you're her daughters, as long as you do well, that's pretty general, and are not afraid. It is fearful, And we should at least acknowledge that. It can be fearful to lead a to follow the leadership of a fallen human man, you know? If it's hard enough to follow Jesus, who is literally true God and also perfect, we struggle with that, don't we? You know? Last time I checked, there's no perfect husbands. So that's even going to be more difficult. It's going to be hard. But we need to not just say, oh yeah, that's the highest calling. We need to acknowledge it's going to be tough. You're going to bear your cross. And also that it's going to be good. But don't be bitter and discontent. So I want to go into some things which you may know and may not know and may offend you. So, yeah, I'm serious. So terms to know. Terms to know. And below are some helpful terms that describe realities you've already observed in your own life. These are not new ideas. It's just terminology on them. And especially the older generations, knowing these terms will be helpful to identify pitfalls and destructive behavior in your daughters and granddaughters so you can advise and counsel them to not do it, to not fall into this trap. By the way, if you haven't heard these terms, everyone under 30 knows and uses them. I mean, seriously. You're not under 30. Whoever said that, somebody back there. Yeah, I know no one in that area is under 30, so. Okay, you are. You're like 17, so. Do you know them? No? Okay, well. Yeah, you know them. There you go. Okay, so if we don't want our daughters to go down the road that's going to lead to discontentment, there's lots of life choices that the world tells them to do, or their inborn sinful nature tells them to do, that we want them to avoid. One low-hanging fruit one is the term girl boss. Who's heard this? All the young people, yes. I knew I could count on you. Anybody over here? You guys are kind of young, yeah, okay. Great, yeah. But mostly the young people. And I saw no gray hairs raising their hands. I'm sorry. Oh, you did? Okay, awesome. She's hip to the bop. Okay, yeah. So girl boss. These are women who believe or function according to the egalitarian lie that they can do anything and everything as well or better than a man. And of course, everyone tells their kids to follow their dreams with no caveats or additional notes. And that's frankly just stupid, I mean, it's just not true. You can't do everything. As long as you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. That's not true. It's a lie, The kid who tops out in high school at 5'2", I'm sorry to say, the chances of him becoming an NBA superstar, not very high. I mean, like, oh, sorry, someone sensitive about that? Yeah, okay. Well, I'll share a personal thing to make you feel better, maybe. So, like, I got 20 extra pounds on me, but even when I was, like, in perfect shape, I was never going to be a cross-country guy. You know what I mean? Like, it was not in the cards. So, but we got to be real about that stuff, right? And we got to be real with our girls, with our granddaughters. We got to be real with them about the distinction between men and women, and it starts there. Don't let them become girl bosses. Also, I want to read a proverb. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And I want to make a very specific application to that, because contrary to what every or almost every young woman thinks or fools herself about, let's just be real honest, and if you get offended, I'm not sorry. Your beauty is going to fade, right? Older ladies, when you were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you're very, very young, there was a part of you that thought that was going to last forever, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna like that.
Yeah, you're not going to lie. Thank you. Yeah. And here's a hard truth, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but it's also something that has to be acknowledged, and we all know it, that the desirability, again, all other things being equal, I'm not talking about the most important things, faithfulness to God, having a good motherly heart, desiring to raise good godly children. Let's all make those equal, right? Take them out of the equation. Who actually maintains on earthly levels their desirability longer, men or women? Men, they do. And we all know it. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. It's true.
There's an old adage,
Yeah?
women marry men thinking they'll never change, or they'll change them, and men marry women thinking they'll never change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. But yeah, I mean, to be really blunt, men and women have different, no, I'm not going to say it. It's too blunt. What's that? That's actually what I was going to say, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, she said men have a shelf life, women have a half life. Is that what you said? I'm glad you said it. I didn't have to. But again, we all know it, right? Women marry across and up, and men marry across and down, on average. I'm sure you could make an exception, fine, whatever. But on average, that is just a sociological observation. Why does this matter? If we don't actually teach our daughters this, if we don't teach them this truth to make them aware of it, what is the world and their sinful flesh going to lead them to do? To always hold out longer and longer and longer until you said it, the shelf life is growing close. And then you might be stuck with being alone or passing up lots of opportunities. Yes?
So are you telling me that being single is wrong?
No. I'm not saying that. Well, I'm not talking about singleness at all, but what I would respond by saying is that it is just an observable fact and a biblical assumption that 99% of all of people are called to marriage. So if you're the exception that's called to celibacy, awesome. That's great. That's not really what I'm addressing. I'm addressing like the 99%. Yeah, and that goes back to the caveats at the beginning. There's lots of exceptions. I'm not here to tell you who's who. But at the same time, I can say confidently that 99% of everybody is called to marriage because 99% of everybody has burning, passionate lust in their heart. If you've ever lusted, that means you need to get married. So this is, yeah, yes.
There's a huge difference between girl bosses and all the categories we're talking about and single.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
I'm not saying it's the same thing.
I worked with a huge crew of the girl boss types. They were, and I saw a number of them aging out, reaching the point where they were not going to be able to have children.
Yeah.
And watch the desperation occur.
Yeah.
Where they went from, they realized that, hey, my shelf life is expired.
Yeah.
I'm reaching that half-life point.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's amazing how their priorities change.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If your goal is actually to be happily or even reasonably happy married, you got to do things to get there.
I watched one of them dump a career, and
Yeah.
her husband worked in our organization as well, and she started having children. They had 4 kids.
Yeah. Praise be to God. That's awesome.
She was,
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I'm glad it worked out for her. But what we don't want is to not talk about these things and
for that one, there were 19 others
that it didn't work out for. Yeah.
that I saw turning into their 40s with no husband and son.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really a disaster. I mean, it's really, really sad. But that's my point. Like, and I tell this to all my confirmation kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they give all the wrong answers. And like, I say, no, all of you guys should have said, I want to be a husband and a father. And maybe you have some ideas of how you're going to provide for your family. Every single girl should have said, maybe not every single one, we just talked about exceptions, but whatever. General rule, wife and a mother, right? And, that's, if we don't actively talk about it, the world's going to fill in those blanks. When you think about what you're going to be when you grow up, if you're in school, you are thinking about jobs, careers, what you're going to accomplish. I'm not saying it's bad to think about those things, but let's do first things first and orient our kids' lives towards the attainment of that goal. And so, hypergamy kind of gets into this, where this is a sociological observation that women generally seek to marry men, not just of older age, but older age because of this, generally seek to marry men of higher social or economic status than themselves, otherwise known as marrying up. Functionally, this means that women are less prone to quote-unquote settle. Like, if you've seen the stats on like dating apps, which most people meet their spouses now on, that's also another little factoid we could have gone on and on about. There's this very interesting phenomenon that we all know. 80% of the girls are after what percentage of the guys? Like 20, yeah. Or even a bigger disparity. I mean, it is. I mean, and again, it's a sociological observation. It's just the way things are. Men are much more readily willing to settle for not their ideal. Again, men have other problems, which we've kind of gone into some of those already. But like, this is, what's that? Oh, I thought that was directed at me. I wasn't sure what was going on. No, that's fine. So this results in many women pursuing a few, yet very desirable, in their eyes anyway, men. Unfortunately, this is often done with little regard for their own desirability or long-term consequences, like what you just illustrated, either putting career first or pining away for this ideal and letting lots of good guys that they could have been reasonably happy with pass them by. Always holding out for Mr. Right or Mr. Perfect, maybe. This is something that I think we can say is a tendency of women. Again, I'm not accusing individual people here of doing that. My point is that it is a trend and we need to be aware of it. And this can also result in something else. Who knows this term? Oh, well, who knew hypergamy? Yeah, young people. Yep. What about alpha widow? Have you heard of that? No. Yeah, not so many. So an alpha widow is a woman who once dated a highly desirable, notice I'm not saying good, but highly desirable according to what she thinks she wants, at least at that point. Anyway, highly desirable man and is not content with anyone of perceived lesser value or status. So this is a very dangerous reality that for many women, if they dated, let's just say, the quarterback of the football team in high school who was, man on campus and just the guy, right? She's not going to be content, or she will be tempted not to be content with anyone who is lower than that, which means she's excluding what percentage of the population? Like 99.9%, yeah. Again, I am not accusing every single one of your daughters or you of holding these views to the extreme that I'm saying. But my point is that this is an observable tendency, and we need to warn our daughters not to fall into this trap. Because in the long stream of human history, who had huge influence over mate selection, if you want to talk like an anthropologist? Parents. Why? Because, and I'll be blunt because you young people are young, and I'm your elder, so I can do this. Young people are stupid, I mean, yeah, like, and I mean stupid in a particular way, right? They're very passionate, very zealous, so you bring a lot of that good stuff to the table, but at the same time, impulsive, right? Not thinking long term. If you've lived 60 years on this earth, you literally have a bigger perspective. You just do. And that used to be brought to bear, and it was built into the legal code, right? And in the 1943 Catechism, where how do you enter rightfully into marriage? Anybody know? How do you rightfully enter into marriage? What's that? Betrothal, which includes parental consent. Yeah, that's the first thing I ask every couple who walks in my door for premarital counseling. I say, you should have come to pre-engagement counseling, and do you have your parents' blessings? Anyway, that's a whole nother rant. Let's keep on going. This is a little note. Men tend to do the opposite in terms of social or economic status while prioritizing. No surprise, we all know it's true. Prioritizing what? Physical beauty. Yeah. Now again, a good Christian man and a good Christian woman are going to put what at the top? Faithfulness, all these things. But even the most pious Christian man and the most pious Christian woman, physical stuff does count. And it's not sinful to say that either. You know what I mean? It does count. It does matter. And all of us know it does. And it's not wrong to admit that or to act on that. Or for those of us who are married, to have acted on that. But my point is that, yeah, the pie chart, it's bigger for physical attractiveness in a guy's mind. And I don't think we should say that's necessarily wrong. Now, if he makes it everything or the majority, that's not only wrong, but it's stupid. And we see in the Bible, like in the days of Noah, right? Against their fathers and mothers' wishes, they go after the daughters of men, the Canaanites, right? You know, this was stupid. Why? Because they were beautiful. So just because something shouldn't be the top reason, it doesn't mean it's not part of the pie. So again, there's things to warn men about too. Because every man and every woman, sooner or later, is going to get old and gray and wrinkly, and physical beauty is not really going to be that important anymore, you know? So anyway, the wall. And this is what you were talking about. Who's heard about the wall? You young people need to read more. The lessening of a woman's desirability as she ages. I already said this is just a fact. It's not a theological evaluation, but a reality that we all know. It affects women earlier than men. A modern woman is taught to evaluate herself as a man. Now, in some ways, this is natural. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what would I want done to me, I should do to others, right? Okay, fine. But my point is that what a woman finds very attractive or desirable in a man is not the same as what a man desires in a woman. And so what many young women, your daughters and granddaughters, will be taught by some people in their lives is that, oh yeah, you're so accomplished, you're such an amazing catch, but why? Because you have a really high-paying job, because you have all this educational attainment, because of all these things, because you're tough, right? Maybe not full-out girl boss, but even a pious Christian woman who's like, hey, I've got this advanced degree, I've got this high-paying job, why aren't there more men? Because typically, does a man care about those things? No, absolutely not. Again, you could bring up tons of exceptions, I'm sure. On average, in relation to what women care about, it's just not a big factor. It just isn't. And so I don't blame them for thinking, oh, that's what I find desirable, so that's probably what they find desirable. And that's what they're taught too. So I do have some understanding or sympathy for them of this belief, but it's not accurate. And that's why there's all these women that you were talking about. They think that they're great catches, but they're hitting that wall hard. And they don't understand the dynamics at work, or rather, down deep they probably do, according to nature, but they are lying to themselves, or have been lied to, whatever. It's the same result. What we don't want is the result of this, just one second, is that our daughters to end up bitter and alone. Because I'm sure those women were very bitter about it. And of course, the biggest, I know that this is a political thing and not, but I do think it makes the point. The biggest difference in the political spectrum is between married people and unmarried people, but particularly unmarried women are one of the most radical left political groups. I mean, it's incredible. And we were talking about this, I don't know who asked the question, but when there was that graph like, oh, you're saying the men are here, but you say women follow men, why did they not follow them in the first place? Because they were following the culture. Yeah, you asked this question. So it's the same thing. If a woman is not married to her husband, then who is the authority figure in her life? It is the culture, it is the government, it is her own whatever, you know what I mean? But if she's married to a man, all of a sudden she curves over to the right, typically. Yes?
So one of the issues I think that we are seeing now
Yeah,
I mean, I've read multiple books where these women are like, I didn't know this, and they're 42 years old.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, your peak fertility was in your 20s, but either you weren't taught that, which could be true, or they were actually taught it doesn't matter.
yeah.
But it does matter.
It does matter. It does matter. It absolutely does. I mean, it does matter just like in a marriage market way, even apart from the theological stuff. It's just a fact. And if you couldn't hear her point was that fertility drops off, yes, for men, but nowhere near as fast and as hard as for women. I mean, if you want to be a wife and a mother and you don't decide to get settled down until the age of 40, your chances of having a child are drastically reduced. It's not impossible. And if you weren't blessed with a good Christian man to marry, I'm not blaming that person, but these are just facts that we have to talk about. Why? So that our daughters don't end up bitter and alone if they desire to be with a husband. There's lots of other stuff we could talk about, but I'll just close with this on this section. Or no, there's more. Never mind. So other things that really harm marriage for our daughters and granddaughters is, of course, promiscuity. And you've probably been lectured about this a million times, but you got to talk about it. And I want to push it even further. Theologically, so please hear what I'm saying. Theologically, promiscuity of a man or a woman, is the same, right? You know what I mean? Like it is a sin against God, right? I'm not denying this. But in terms of someone's marriage desirability, if a woman is promiscuous, and we see this all through history, what happens? Yeah, the desirability goes down way more than a guy. I'm not saying it's okay for guys to fornicate, okay? This is not what I'm saying, or it's a lesser sin. My point, though, is that that's just a reality, because virginity is valued more by guys towards girls than vice versa. That is just generally true, and it always has been. It's never going to change. And our girls need to be taught that. Obviously, our guys need to be told that it's wrong, too, and they shouldn't go to hell because they want to sleep with people. But my point is that like it's very, very important that to tell your girls, like, do not do this. Or if they have, in terms of someone who is looking to marry them, if they have slept around. Here's another term, body count. Have you heard of this? How many people someone has slept with? Like, there's a big difference between 2 and 15, You can't go back in history and erase what you did. You can't, get a time-traveling machine so that your daughters or granddaughters or sons or grandsons, for that matter, to go back and erase that. It's there. That's always going to be there. It can be forgiven, but there may be effects. You know what I mean? But my point is that you repent and you don't keep on into this. And that actually is going to matter not just theologically, which is the bigger point, but I'm trying to make an earthly but very significant point about in terms of marriage potential later on. Those things do matter. Okay, let's keep going. I don't like using this term, and I'm sorry I brought it up. I truly do apologize, but I don't want to lessen the punch. Divorce raped. Who's heard this term? Few people. This is one of the reasons why speaking of the marriage market, we're going to kind of slide back into some guys stuff. This is what a lot of guys who literally, not just I hear talking about, but who have come and talked to me. I'm talking about like pious Christian guys, very pious. But in regular conversation, because everybody their age talks like this, they will say, "Yeah, Pastor, I'm scared about getting married because I don't want to get married and then get divorce raped." They're not trying to be edgy. They're just, and what it is the term men use to express what they fear will happen if they get married. That the state is going to be used to take their kids, their stuff, because the divorce laws favor women to an incredible extent. And this really has ruined the marriage market as well. So anyway, that's a term you should know. And work wife. So okay, So there's the obvious dangers of divorce or promiscuity or things like this, but also with men and women so freely interacting in the workplace constantly, obviously literal adultery has skyrocketed because of workplace relationships, right? Everybody knows that. But another thing you should know about is this term. Who's heard about work wife? Okay. I mean, that's kind of filtered into pop culture. So you guys understand this. Yeah. Emotional, in the least, adultery by means of the workplace. And people like joke around about this, you know. But I mean, I do think we need to teach our kids. I'm not talking about just like young kids so that they don't do it in the future, but like you need to guard your heart and you need to pluck out your eye when you need to, because men and women are always going to fall into these. There's only so many slots or relationships men and women can have, right? You know? And one is marriage, right? And so this is a huge temptation that has just grown, and our kids need to be aware of it so they don't harm their marriages, even if there's not literal physical adultery, emotional adultery. Marry early, I definitely say that. Take betrothal seriously. And also, if you can help them out when it's early, you know? Maybe they can't afford it on their own. But you don't want them to burn and go to hell, you know? Help them out. And my whole point is get ready for marriage beforehand. So Italia is the really extreme example, but bitterness in young ladies and ladies that have hit the wall, or ladies in general, that bitterness really takes on a particular form that we want to guard our girls against. And that is being a schoolmarm, a scold tone policer. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Well, of course a teenage boy is going to say that, you know. I mean, you think every woman in your life is a scold, right? You know? I mean, yeah. I mean, every teenage boy thinks that. But I did too, right? You know? You don't want to hear it from mom again, right? You know? But I mean, this is always a temptation. This is a huge temptation. And as Paul consistently talks about, meddlers, right? Women who grow bitter, their bitterness is going to exude out of them, and we want to guard our girls from this. They become insufferable and want to rule other people's households with that same grasping desire, and just go around and meddle and tone police and scold. And we don't want our daughters to be like that. I'm not saying that they should never talk or not have opinions, but I'm saying we all know a difference between a lovely young or old lady and a scold. And that is a temptation, a huge one that we want to train our girls not to fall into. Not only is it just plain wrong, but also who wants to marry a scold? You know what I mean? Like, that is not a desirable trait. A foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. You know, Proverbs has like 4 or 5 versions of that. Yeah, that obviously means it's kind of important. A foolish woman is clamorous, boisterous. She is simple and knows nothing. As a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is a lovely woman who lacks discretion. So yeah, James, when he talks about guarding the tongue, obviously that is applicable for all men, women, and children, right? And guys need to guard their mouths as well. But we see all through the scriptures that women are told, be careful with your mouth. You know, be careful. What are you stirring up with how you are talking, how you are behaving? Are you stirring up bitterness and resentment and whatnot? Or are your lips filled with grace and wisdom? You know, this is something we got to talk to our girls about. So yeah, we've already talked about the marriage market. I don't know if we have time for nuclear codes, but it sounds interesting, so let's talk about it. So, this is something that I really think you need to tell your girls. So all of like the trad life stuff sometimes is accurate and sometimes is like an inaccurate thought or LARP of what they think traditional life is. So who makes the first move in a relationship? Who would say the guy? Let's do some hands. Who would say the girl? A lot of girls. Guys, there's some very aggressive, forward young ladies over there, so, you know.
There's a reason for that. About half the time, the guys are too shy to say anything, so the girl has to at least say something.
Sure.
Look at him to even get a reaction.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of prod you guys a little bit because here's my take on it. I think that that it's kind of like, you know how like you have the two keys for the missile or whatever, and you got to put them in and turn them at the same time and stuff like that. So using that analogy, many times the person, I would say, typically, again, just don't give me all the exceptions, but typically the guy makes the first overt move. He's the one who walks up. He's the one who asks the girl to go get a coffee or, you know, whatever, you know. But the girl, I would submit, most times, most places, most cultures, is not super forward, but gives the discreet but very clear signals, you know, unless you're a total clod and, you know, out to lunch, you know. Come on, guys, you know when a girl is saying the door's open, right? You know what I mean? You can approach. The approach is open, right? So I would say that yes, the guy makes typically the first overt move. And yes, you are correct that a lot of guys today are either too shy or they don't have the guts and all that kind of stuff. But I would also blame the girls too. I would say that the girls have been taught, wait for the guy to make the first move, blah, 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 especially if they're listening to all this trad life stuff, which a lot of it's fine. But I would say there's a mistake in that. Because, yes, there are some confident guys who'll talk to anybody anytime. I mean, in terms of girls. They don't care, right? Not only is that not every guy, but it shouldn't be every guy. That's just not everybody's personality. Yes, a guy should be able to go and talk to a woman. But at the same time, most guys, they either don't want to or they don't feel very comfortable about it until she has made some signals that she's open to the approach. And our daughters need to be taught that. No guys will talk to me. Will you sit there with a scowl on your face and, you know, I mean, are you sharpening your knife or polishing your gun? You know, I mean, you know, like, but my point is that you, and again, I'm saying this and all the women in the room are like, oh, I have my ways, or I had my ways, or whatever. I know that you know this, right? You know what I mean? All you ladies have all your little tricks, and we love them, you know, we do. We love these tricks, and these tricks, I mean, this is why all the comedies, all of Shakespeare's plays, and like all this, we love talking about it because it's so human and so natural. But you got to teach younger people these things because they're in an unnatural world, you know. And you got to tell your girls, like, yeah, don't be promiscuous and don't be like flirting with every guy on the planet. That's just not very ladylike, you know. At the same time, if there is a guy who is worth your attention and you've gotten our blessing or the go-ahead, or depends on the age, whatever, you can fill in the blanks. Give them some subtle signals. And yes, mothers and grandmothers, maybe give them actual literal signals that you gave. You know what I mean? You know? So that they can have an idea how to do this. And it's always hilarious watching teenagers flirt. Sorry to pick on you guys again. Because they're so awkward, right? You know? Just like with any skill, what does it take? Practice. That's what John or Pastor Preuss was telling me. If you want to be a good liar, you have to practice and practice and practice. You know? Nah, it wasn't quite how it went. But you know what I mean? You got to practice. You have to practice. And, okay, so some people are naturals, right? You know? Some people are naturally good at sports. They just have incredible coordination. But even they need practice, right? And most people aren't naturals at flirting or approaching someone else. It's high pressure, right? Who's never been nervous talking to a member of the opposite sex, right? You know? Who are the liars in the room? You know, I mean, seriously. It takes practice, and this is where humanity does not change. Mankind has not really significantly changed on this because it's so built into our nature. And you older generations can tell the young people, like, do this. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, that's so cringe and so cheesy, you know. But guess what? They might use it because who cares, you know? I mean, there's lots of cheesy openings that makes the girl laugh, right? Or the girl does something that's very overt. Well, guess what? A lot of this stuff sometimes passes over the heads of the guys, so you might have to be kind of obvious and overt, you know? Like, maybe if you're like following around sitting wherever he's sitting, you know what I mean? Like, you know, that might tell him, you know, hey, this girl's open to an approach. But that's what I mean about those two nuclear codes, you know? There is an art, there's a dance to it, but talk to them about it. And it's not just sit there and wait for the guy. You know what I mean? Yes, you are correct. Guys should be more out there. But like the girls need to, I would talk about those two nuclear codes, you know? Tell them, this is the stuff you got to think about. Let me talk to you how it worked out for me and your mother and me and, you know, me and grandfather, blah, blah, you know, whatever, you know? I mean, just talk about it. Have fun. Spend time with them on it. Okay, so we're almost done. Last slide. So I just want to end with some scriptures. The Proverbs ones are really, some of them don't belong here, but in the slide before, so I'll skip those. No, this isn't the last slide. I'm skipping all this. All I was going to say is read the table of duties to your sons and your daughters. And a lot of those things from Proverbs. Like literally walk through it. And you'll find what offends them and what they need to be taught and change their minds about on it. And it'll also shape them. So that's the executive summary. Okay, advice for pastors. This is like this random tweet, but it's pretty funny. I think so. I want to start with the bad pastor. So here's my, conclusion, the last couple slides, and really, to summarize how we want to reach out to our sons and our daughters of Missouri. Bad pastor. What's the matter, white boy? You mad? They took my job. Lazy losers, entitled whiners, racists. God hates you. You're under judgment. Why? Because you're lazy or a loser or whatever. Obviously, no one literally says this. But that's how a lot of people hear a lot of criticism. So, a good pastor. Bad things are happening to America because we are under judgment. We need to turn to God and He will shine on us. I mean, that's what the message needs to be. And a whole bunch more of I've been talking about, acknowledgement and all those things. Mothers and grandmothers. Perhaps the most important thing you can do is modeling. Model being a godly wife and help your children raise your grandchildren. And if you do that, you're going to wind up spending time and you're going to talk about this stuff. Open up those scriptures, read the hard passages about submitting to your husband, read the hard passages about Proverbs that don't put contentious women in a very flattering light, and warn them. And then talk about the joys too. Talk about the struggles, talk about the joys, but do it with them. And then here's a hilarious meme. I love this one. Fathers, and grandfathers, perhaps the most important thing you can do for the sons of Missouri is to encourage and help them be strong leaders of their families. To really, really support them. And only you can break generational feminism. So the old guy's saying, she's the boss, Now, I know how most older generations mean that. They don't literally mean it. It's a tease, it's a joke, But that's not how the young guys hear it. Because they are awash in feminism. You say she's the boss in 1935, everyone knows you're what? You're joking around, You say that today? Yeah, you're serious. At least it's perceived that way. Or the incredibly cringe saying, happy wife, happy life, right? Well, and there's that guy with a shield. Only you can prevent generational feminism. Someday you'll lead your wife as God intended. That's what these guys need to hear. whether they be little, whether they be old. And again, model it and talk to them and spend the time. Okay, that next one, we talked about all that stuff. Let's jump to the conclusion because I'm out of time. If anyone does not provide for his own, especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. 1 Timothy 5:8, you do have a special duty to your own. You do. You have a bigger duty to them than anybody else. And this is straight from Scripture. Consider Psalm 50, verse 20. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. How abhorrent it is in the eyes of the Lord to not work on the relationship with our own. And perhaps the best verse on all of this from Malachi 4. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. Obviously, this is talking about sending John the Baptist in preparation for our Lord, the Messiah. And here we see intertwined the faith and also family formation and passing down the greatest inheritance you can. A couple other quotes from the Psalms. That our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth, that our daughters may be as pillars, sculptured in palace style. Yeah, that's our hope. That's our dream. That's part of what we want as Christian parents, to see our children blossom in the gospel and also in the life here in this earth. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head, dwelling down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the edge of his garments. It is like the dew of Hermon, descending upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, life evermore. You don't have to always choose between your earthly life and the life to come. Yes, our Lord says, and we need to take it dreadfully seriously, he who does not hate father and mother is not worthy of me. If you have to choose, your highest loyalty is to the Lord. May we be blessed that we don't have to choose, and that we do dwell in unity with our children, our grandchildren, with our fathers and mothers, with our grandparents, in the Lord, and to thrive in the Lord, here in time and there in eternity. Thank you very much. I think we have time for questions. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. You want to see more charts? Excellent. Yes. Yeah. Oh, you do actually. Okay. Yeah.
With Absalom, you said that in the beginning his rage was understandable, but as it progressed, it became more and more sinful. How would one stop the understandable rage from becoming sinful? Like you see a lot with the, especially with the kind of obsession with Nazism and white supremacism. It starts out with an understandable bitterness that they were taught their entire lives to hate their race and their culture, but that turns into hating other races and cultures that shouldn't be hated at all. And that's sinful. How do you stop that from happening?
Yeah, let me repeat the question first. The question was, and I'm just going to summarize, is that if Absalom had understandable anger, I would make a distinction about like rage typically is never, almost never. Anyway, that's a side point. Anyway, he has understandable anger based in justice, or rather the injustice of what's happened to his sister. But then it proceeds to blossom into even greater and greater sin. How do you stop that from happening in people today, or how do we personally stop that? Is that a fair summary? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that if, let's look at it from different perspectives. If you are the person who is tempted by your bitterness to go into bad directions or to go into sin, then I would say, in this earthly life, are you always going to get perfect justice? You're not. We all are going to have to, in many facets of our lives, leave vengeance for the Lord. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't seek justice in this life for true wrongs. But there's lots of stuff in all of our lives where we've had to say, this is not probably going to be corrected except by a literal special act of God. And I'm just going to have to be content with the gospel. I'm going to have to be content with what God has given me. And so I would point them to, what is the sin? It's coveting. You know what I mean? Like, it's coveting. And that coveting of what they have not been given has led them to seek goodness apart from God, regardless of where that's going. But the deeper issue is the coveting. And that's what I think you got to talk to them about. Or think about yourself, however it is. But yeah, if you are a friend, or if you're a parent or someone else, I mean, I would start out by saying, and make a total clear acknowledgement of, yeah, these things that happened, or this systemic problem or whatever, is wrong. You know, that does help. But that doesn't mean that we aren't to suffer in this world and still give all glory to God and not go in our covetous hearts to sin. I mean, that is kind of a vague thing, but like, I think that gives a framework. I don't know, does that answer it? Yeah. Sort of, yeah. Not totally satisfying. I understand. Yeah.
If I could just test out some slight pushback, specifically on the wall that you're describing with like worldly desirability.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say, did I say world? I never said worldly desirability.
Desirability in general?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if it's, I'd have to think about it more. If you're not just saying like, are you saying like physical attractiveness?
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
So I would say earthly, which has a less negative connotation. Yeah, just ask your question. Let's sort it out.
So, yes, it's true that to some extent, like, earthly beauty fades as time goes on.
Yeah.
But to say that that should be a driving factor of, oh, you better get married soon because that's going to go away. If you're a Christian woman looking for a Christian man, wouldn't you be hoping to find a man where that's not the main factor anyways?
But even a good, pious Christian man, it is going to be not the main factor, but a factor.
Sure. But
And wouldn't a woman want to provide her husband with a beautiful wife? That's a good gift. I mean, that's why I would say it's earthly. It's an earthly desirability, not a worldly. Like, it's a good gift.
no, yeah, it's a gift. I'm just wondering, should that be a main driving factor for women to feel not that they shouldn't be seeking marriage, obviously, but to have that.
If I overemphasize it, it's just because I think it's not talked about enough.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't think it should be like the main, and it shouldn't drive you to pick someone who's not a Christian or not a good fit or whatever. So I don't want to make it everything, but just because it's not everything doesn't mean it's nothing either. So yeah, I mean, this is helping moderate the advice, I guess. But again, let me push back a little bit and say, beauty, it's not everything, but whatever beauty God gave you in terms of earthly beauty, yes, as you grow in marriage, that is going to increasingly be less and less central to the marriage. And I'm not saying it should be the center at all. But at the same time, it is a gift. It is a wonderful thing that God's blessed us all with. We all have earthly beauty, and it fades. I mean, the flowers wither, the grass fades. I mean, it happens. But at the same time, I do think we need to to tell our girls that even if I were to say, it shouldn't matter, girls, but it does. And I'm not saying that actually. But even if I were to say that, that's still an important point to make, you know? I don't know, does that help at all? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a young man,
Yeah.
you know, one of the desires, whether you really think about it or not, is to have children.
Yeah.
And that wall business, a big part of that is reaching the point where children are,
It's a lot harder.
perhaps
Yeah.
quite unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are real factors. I mean, I'm sure that there is a sense of, well, I don't know if this is a proper discussion, but we're all okay with women saying, hey, can you actually provide for me? It shouldn't be about money, right? Of course it is.
It's a fair question.
It is a fair question, and it's a proper question, actually. I'm going to ask any guy who wants to marry my daughter, can you provide for her? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's worldly or sinful for a woman to be like, how are you going to provide for me and my kids? Our future kids, you know what I mean? Like, that's a fair thing. It's a factor in marriage. And physical attraction between two people is a part of marriage. It's a good part of marriage. God's blessed us. I mean, if I really want to be snarky and prove my point, go read Song of Solomon, you know? I mean, come on.
God made it so women are most attractive when they're also
Most fertile. Yes. God designed our bodies like this. Yeah, absolutely. It's built into nature, and God made nature. So, yeah. Did you have a? Okay. Yes.
So I just wanted to add something there. And
Sure.
I'm not a guy, plainly, but I think the guys, you know, so that the young ladies here might hear, at least from my opinion, and most guys are not going to contradict me because no guy wants to say to his wife, well, yeah, you weren't the most beautiful one I married you anyway. But I just think that, you know, our definition of beauty,
Yeah.
we shouldn't, you know, that shouldn't be, okay, who's the Hollywood.
Yeah. Sure.
But I mean, in my mind, and maybe
Yeah.
the guys would correct me, I know my husband won't hear, but, you know, I mean, beauty, I think, includes, you know, happiness.
Yes. Yeah.
Health, I mean, brush your teeth, have a smile on your face. I remember back,
Yes.
you know, during the time of the inauguration and all, there were some pictures, and I read some comments online when they were noticing that Usha Vance was looking at J.D. Vance, you know, with this like glow.
Yeah. Adoration.
This guy
Yeah.
said, every man wants to be looked at the way she is looking at. him."
Yeah. Find yourself a girl who looks like it, looks at you like this. Yeah.
That's what I just want to say to the young women or any woman.
Mm-hmm.
From my opinion, and you know, not as I say, I'm not a guy, but I think that, you know, maybe you think that, you know, your nose looks funny or, you know, some other thing, but if you're smiling, if you're happy, if you're healthy, if you look at the guy and you think this is the greatest guy I know,
Yeah.
then you are beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a godly, submissive woman also is very attractive. You know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right, and I would not deny any of that stuff. Not because I'm scared about the consequences like your husband, but I mean, I go back to Wisconsin. I can just roll out any bombs I want. That's what Olson said. But you know, so. But my point is, yeah, you're right. I agree with you, honestly. Like, of course, a truly beautiful woman has all of those other things too, and those things are important. I'm just saying we can't ignore all that stuff because the trend I'm not talking about like the hyper worldly world, right? You know what I mean? But in the church, I hear way too many people say, physical beauty shouldn't matter or doesn't matter. It's just about being faithful or being kind or nice. That's just not true. So that's why I'm emphasizing the other part. And of course, no matter what type of physical beauty you've been blessed with or not blessed with, can you actually make yourself beautiful in this broader way by many other means? Yes, you can. Yes, you can, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, all of this stuff, but that's my point. We got to talk about it all. You got to talk about the whole pie and those just hard realities that are built into nature about fertility, earthly beauty, and, as you said, a shelf life. How rude, you know? Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to ask about,
We don't need any brown nosing in front of us. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if every Wyoming congregation is like mine, but we do have a lot of sons of Missourians who are now fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers.
Yeah.
And that yet they are sons of Missouri. Some of those, did what they thought was best. Some of them didn't maybe do what they should have done. And I think there's a lot of lamenting the fact that their children aren't in church.
Yeah.
And maybe they're waking up to it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a ministry to those individuals as well, and I wondered if you would speak to that.
Well, honestly, that's what I've been talking about the whole time. No, seriously. I mean, I think that, oh, you mean in their lament, not like what to do, but in their lament. Now I understand. I was like, that's what I've been talking about, man. I understand now. Yeah, just to repeat the question or comment, the point was that there really is a ministry and a need to help people as they lament the loss of a child to unbelief. Fairly summarized, yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Obviously, I was focused on what can you do, how to approach solving the problem. But you're absolutely correct. How to walk with someone who has experienced that, because I would say that affects pretty much everybody, almost everybody. I mean, may we all be so blessed to not have that lament. I'd point you to Sean Denzer. He did a whole thing on lament, and even though it's not specifically on that, boy, it had great stuff. Pastor Sean Denzer. I don't know if that's online or not, but you should just call him up and he'll send it to you. I hope.
I'd comment on that.
Yeah.
I've actually dealt with that a lot at the two congregations I've been at, with particularly boomers and older, with whose kids left or just stopped going to church, and the guilt that they feel, and to talk them through their lament, and to hear their confession, absolve them, and then get them to look outward into the congregation at the young people that don't have parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
All these ones that Pastor Ramirez is saying are they're coming back to the church, young,
Yeah.
conservative. Oftentimes their parents aren't following them; they're just alone.
Yeah.
But you have an opportunity to reach out to these young men, young families who are struggling financially. You can help them. You can give gift cards to your pastor to be given anonymously. You can do things.
Oh, I thought you meant for yourself. That's why I laughed. I thought you were making a joke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Everybody laughed and everyone else like,
You knew what I was saying?
I do now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That'll be the last time I say it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so that sparked another thing, because I too have dealt with a lot of this grief and guilt. One resource, hey, Peter, who runs your dad's website?
James Preuss, Pastor James.
Yeah, so Pastor Rolf Preuss had a 4-part things on parenting, and the last section has some very good words. It's not very long or extensive, but very good words about those whose children have fallen away and how to evaluate yourself and deal with that guilt and not falling into certain ditches. I won't try to say more, but if you go on Christ for Us website and look under parenting or whatever, you'll find it. I've handed that out to people before, the whole packet. So yeah. I saw a hand. Yeah.
It's also to never give up.
Yeah.
We have multiple people in our congregation, their spouses for years that were atheists and before they passed,
Yeah.
became Christian.
Yeah. No.
We've had numerous children come back,
Yeah.
so it's.
No, we should be praying for it every day.
It's
Yeah.
It's witnessing when you have the opportunity, depending on the situation, that may be pretty quiet, it may be cautious,
Yeah.
but it is witnessing.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to note about the marriage market is I don't know the experience of the folks here, but I have heard it from many other brothers in the ministry, and I've observed it as well. But there's way more young guys that are active in church that want to get married, and there is a lack in terms of numbers of young girls that want to be married and be serious about the faith. And that's a big difference than even what everyone was talking about 10 years ago. Where are all the guys? Where are all the Christian guys? That's what everyone was talking about 10 years ago. And now it's all the opposite. That's just something to be aware of. And to point that out, network. Like, seriously, network. Like, I always tell young men or young ladies in the congregation who are like, Pastor, I can't find someone to marry, blah, blah, blah. I say, well, I take it as part of my duty to try to help you. I mean, I'm not your father, but I will talk to other pastors and other congregations and find out, you know what I mean? Like, help them network, you know? Try to set them up. We need more matchmakers, frankly. Not meddlesome matchmakers, but, you know.
So I can think of two. Monica Preuss is one matchmaker. Okay. Victoria Christensen at Trinity would be another.
And every pastor ought to
Yeah,
be.
We know a few.
Yeah.
We have connections as well. I wanted to say one more thing. Single women and young men. You know, while you're waiting around for a spouse, and you want to, maybe this is doing the same thing, kind of self-serving, but
It's okay.
if you want to learn how to babysit, ask pastors to watch your kids. But seriously, you can have family life, and you can have some of what you're looking and longing for by just offering yourself in the congregation to help young families with their kids. Everybody's looking for that. At least we are, so.
Yeah.
I had a wonderfully pious older woman in my life when I was younger, and the advice she gave me when I was like thinking, will I ever get married, was stop thinking about that. Think about making yourself a better wife.
Yeah.
whoever you might marry.
Yeah.
Pray for your husband and for his parents.
Yeah.
who are raising him right now, and stop worrying about if it's going to ever happen, how it's going to happen. Just work on yourself and being a good wife, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah, totally true. Just to summarize it, work on yourself, pray for it, and, you know, yeah, don't worry. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, fretting is sin. It really is. It really is. I'm not saying it's just going to magically happen and you shouldn't work on it, but I mean, yeah, I mean, absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. And you should be praying. Because if you're praying about it, like, that means you're serious. Yeah. And then here. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a practical question about, having male-only time, but then also, for young men with the economic challenges, you have to work more, and then you have to spend time with your wife and children.
You have to.
Yeah, so. And I don't work in a profession. I work with mostly women because I'm at an elementary school. So, is there a way? Am I looking at it wrong to view it as a balance, or is there a way to have my cake and eat it too?
Well, I mean, I would just say that, and I would just appeal to the wisdom and experience of all the people who've been married here. I know it's true for me. Your wife might be your best friend, but she's your wife. You need friends too. And so carving out time as a married person, both the guy and the girl, so that there's time for her to hang out with her friends and you to hang out with your buddies is very important. So I don't think it's like have your cake and eat it too. Obviously, you need to prioritize your family over friend time, but I think your family life is going to be healthier when you actually like join a softball league. And I say something that's scheduled, you know what I mean? Now I like sports, so I would tend towards that. But, you know, maybe it's something else, you know? But my point is like, if it's scheduled, you are much more apt to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go hang out with my friends every Thursday night. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? You're going to do other stuff. But if you are in a softball league, you might not make it every Thursday night. But you probably will be more consistent because it's a regularly scheduled program. So that would be my advice on that. Up here in front.
One more.
Yeah.
Just pointing out that the church, I've heard critique, that they're very good at saying, women, pray for your future spouse, you know, work on yourself, make sure you're ready for marriage.
Yeah.
And they hit that really well, but they always seem to leave the men out of that equation.
Oh, I mean, I could go on a long, long time about that.
I mean, it's for the men too.
Yeah. Yeah, they need to do all the same thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, only on the male side of stuff, but yeah, you know. But yeah, no, I mean, yes, if you are waiting, and frankly, you know, like I said before, I do think that there's more guys, there's a kind of a glut of young guys right now. And so, yeah, they do need to be praying, and they do need to be improving themselves and doing the best they can. Yeah, that advice is across the board. Yeah. And I do think that, that people do say both sides, but yeah, I mean, all of this advice really you can apply to yourself, no matter who you are.
Sorry,
Okay,
that means we're done.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah. Okay, well, so we're done, right?
Is there one really good question left? Yeah,
No pressure. No pressure. Yeah, there we go. We got one.
Right, at my age, I find myself looking.
How old are you?
45.
Okay.
I find looking to the older men in my congregation, right? You know,
Yeah, I didn't hear you. Find what?
I need to look to the older men in my congregation, right? And here in Casper, we're fortunate because those people are there, right?
Mhm.
And to your point, right? I don't know if you're an outdoors person, right? But who better? Don't give your pastor gift cards. Give him a gun and take him hunting.
Or give him a gift card. I mean, you would probably say this because you're selfish, and you know. But he would probably say, no, do give me a gift card for a gun, for a gun, so I get to pick it out, right? You know. And that's.
Shooting lessons.
Oh yeah, there you go. No, I mean, no, point well taken. I mean, like honestly, that whole male time together is a perfect opportunity for the old guys to be like, hey, come on, let's go do something, you know what I mean? Or young guys in the congregation, I've got a couple acres in the back with a shooting range. Come on over, you know? Like, there's so many opportunities. And I mean seriously, and then I'll stop. But like seriously, if you spend the time and you think about it, and you think about the stuff we've been talking about the last 2 days, you will come up with ideas. It really is a matter of being intentional and actually having that paternal heart or maternal heart to the sons of Missouri, the daughters of Missouri, and you'll figure out the specifics. It's just taking the time and working on it. You can do it. You really can, by the grace of God.
Thank you very much.
Yep.